What's up, guys, and welcome back to Adventure Boat. My name is Kelly. Today we're going to answer the age-old question. Can you replace your CV boots on your Toyota without removing your axles? Stay tuned. So the test vehicle today is the 2013 Toyota Tacoma 2nd Gen. This thing's 10 years old and it's got about 80,000 miles on it, so still very low mileage. Both CV joints, driver and passenger, are both ripped on the inside. And it's really just age. They just kind of, with the Arizona heat and the wear of it, with having the leveling kit on it, it just kind of overaged tore. More so on the passenger side. That's why we're starting on this side first. I've already got the truck jacked up on jack stands and the front tire has been removed. Very first thing we're going to do is a full disassembly to expose the axle shaft, and that starts with the dust cap. Underneath the lock washer is this cotter pin and this large bolt. Both have to come out. Using a very large 35mm socket in my impact, I'm going to just break this. I'm not going to remove it all the way, just break it off and just make sure it's going to come off. I'm definitely going about this in a whole different order than what most people are accustomed to and what the manual says, and that is for good reason. On my 3rd Gen Tacoma, I had a hell of a time getting the dust cap off. I actually put a hole in it and had to replace it with a new one. It would not come off. So I'm doing this route to be sure that if there's any issues getting into the internals of the big nut on there at the end of the axle, that will happen early on and not, later after I get everything else disassembled. So that is next, removing the steering and the sway bar. And this is a new ball joint separator that I'm trying from Harbor Freight. Let's see if this thing is worth anything. It was only 20 bucks. It was a good deal. And there it is. All right, this thing works awesome. Link in the description below. And next we're gonna remove the sway bar mount. So I just picked up this Harbor Freight Hercules 12-volt long arm ratchet, electric ratchet, and it already broke. Literally the second time I tried to use it, it just completely snapped. Not impressed. If you ever run into the situation like I have here where your sway bar disconnect, it just spins. It won't actually grab onto the nut. The nut hole assembly here is spinning. There's a little Allen head insert on the tip here. Once I find the right key, and that's how you hold that nut on while you're actually loosening it. Now with the 12mm socket, I'm going to remove the bolt that holds on the brake cable and the ABS sensor line, just to get it a little freed up, more movement to get this whole thing out of the way. Now with the 19mm, I'm going to remove the 2 bottom bolts here that hold the hub assembly to the lower control arm. Now I'm going to remove the end of the axle nut here. I'm going to hit it a little harder and I need to protect the threads, so I'm putting the nut back on. Jeez, that was way harder than it should have been. So now I've got the whole hub assembly kind of supported with the ratchet strap and this jack stand. It's really not going anywhere. Now it's time to peel into the axle. I have done a ton of research into the proposition that you can actually do a true repair of an axle, replacing the CV boots on trail by only taking it to the point where we've taken it right now. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. There are a bunch of options to get you home from the trail if you do have a ripped boot out on trail. Those repairs consist of duct tape, Teflon tape, electrical tape, any kind of tape that you can just basically throw a Band-Aid on that boot until you get it home to do a true full repair. Then that is, again, a Band-Aid. That's not a true, actually Toyota spec repair. It won't last more than a week at best. So definitely not a suggestion. I've seen a couple videos on YouTube that just made me cringe, that the fact that you can actually think that you can make that as a true repair. It's not. So now we have to actually pull the CV and do a true repair to make this back to any kind of long-term usable state. Oh, we're doing something because we're leaking grease. All right, spin it just a little bit, pinch more, right there. Oh, it's coming. All right, spin it again, right there. You got it, you're good. Thank you, baby. That made that way easier. So here's the axle. You can tell it's in pretty bad shape. This is where the failure occurred, and it actually completely tore. It wasn't actually tore until I started really pulling on it, and then it went all the way. But yeah, this is where the failure occurred. And this boot actually is not in bad shape. However, we're in it, might as well replace it. There's no point in just kind of waiting for it to fail when at some point it will fail. So we're gonna do the whole thing. To orient yourself to the axle, this is gonna be the outer section, this is the inner section. So the first thing we're gonna do is remove all of these clips to remove the boots completely. I saw this method and I actually really liked it. It was just very simple. These are actually very thick gauge straps that are actually pretty difficult to get off. But if you just cut right here with a cutoff wheel, makes it really quick and easy. So obviously the lower part of the CV looks really good. The grease looks in really good condition. I'm gonna do a really good job cleaning that out, and then we have to go to the problem child down on this end. So we know the outer's in good shape. Now to look at the inner, this is the one, the actual boot that failed, and it pulled right out. It doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit of grime and gunk in there, which probably should not really be in there, but we'll get this cleaned up and for further inspection. Even the grease right here where it was definitely leaking doesn't look too terrible. All the bearings feel really good. I don't think there's going to be any issue with this. Let's get this snap ring out and get this disassembled so we can get it really cleaned up. And I've got this brass punch, and all I'm going to do is coerce this out ever so gently. I fully realize that not everyone has access to a shop press. However, I just picked this up because I have to do front end service on my Ford, and I got to press out some bearings. So I've always wanted one, so I picked it up from Harbor Freight. They're very affordable. It was on sale. My buddy Joe says I have a Harbor Freight addiction right now, and I would say that it is a probably more than unhealthy addiction. He is probably correct. So I've watched a bunch of videos and done a bunch of research on how to get these disassembled, to find out different ways of how people are doing it. And I gotta be honest, every single video makes pulling this piece here out of this piece here very easy. And this is only my second time doing it, and it has never been easy. I don't know how they're doing it to make it seem that easy. I saw one dude just tap it off with another guy just kind of fell out with the end as soon as he pulled the cotter pin. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but this has never been an easy removal. Even now, I have no idea how I'm going to get this back in. So let's get it cleaned up and see what happens. So this is the official Toyota parts kit for the complete CV boot replacement. In the kit, you've got new bands, new boots, more bands, small bands. You've got your replacement retainer clips, and then you have your grease. Dark grease and light grease. We're going to start with replacing this clip on the end of the pliers here and try to get this thing pulled out. And all we're going to do is use our inside. This ring got a little chewed up when I was pulling it, when I was whacking on it, so that's in the garbage. And then we're going to put the new one from the rebuild kit right in, and just pushes right in. Wish they were all that easy. You've got two boots. This one has got notches in it. Obviously it goes on the inner, and then you've got just a round boot. This is the outer. Cannot catch a break. Well, I cheated and ended up using the press to get this back on. However, did not go unscathed. When I was whacking on it, this bearing came out. So I'm going to put this one back in. Make sure it stays clean. clip back in to hold this part in for good. It's seated nice and tight. Now to repack the grease. So for the grease, the tan goes on the inner, which is... It is the next day, and last night I made a really major error with the grease. I had notes, and I was kind of rushing through things. I thought I was orienting the axle in the correct position and had the colors correct, but I did not. So please don't make the same mistake that I did. Now I have to scoop out all the grease from one end and put in the other. So the way they actually orient is the tan grease goes in the inner, the black grease goes on the outer. When you pull it apart, it's kind of obvious. I was rushing through it. It was late. I have no excuses except for just complete loss of concentration. So don't do what I did. Do it right the first time, and it will save you a lot of time and energy and rubber gloves and grease. So now I'm going to be adding the black grease to the outer, which is closest to the wheel. And you really want to try to use all the grease in these packets. We're going to need one of these ring tools to get the clamps on these rings actually cinched up. Link in the description below. Now on the little rings here, there's two different sizes. There's obviously a difference in the boot size. The boot on the inner is thicker than the boot on the outer, so I'm using the smaller ring on the outer boot. And what I'm doing for the tan is I have leftovers from the bags when I initially put them in the wrong boot. So I'm just going to put all of that into the new boots, and then from my other kit, I'm going to use the tan out of that to fill up the boot. And I'm going to have to go to Toyota and get more, which sucks because the only way you can get this is to buy a whole nother rebuild kit, which is $55. All right, now I've got the inner boot in, and one thing I definitely want to do, I'm going to take some of this grease here. I'm going to put it on the end of this ring, and that will kind of help keep this centered. Want it for reinstallation. If you can get this ring to stay centered and pushed in, it's a lot easier for it to go into its home into the axle. Right here on the inside boot, this is the axle side, this is the wheel side. There's actually a little notch here where the smaller end of the boot goes into. You want to make sure it's sitting nicely inside that notch. Just like that. So apparently there's a special tool to get this band on, which I do not have. And I'm going to try to make this work. Apparently all you do is pinch this point here and this point here together. And then you can fold this over into one of these notches here. See if we can get it to work. All right, that's on there. Time to get this thing back in the truck. It's a very simple sort of install if everything goes well. You're taking the inner, you're going to slide the shaft into the receptacle, kind of find the notches where it's obviously grooved, and you're going to basically clock it in and then try to push it in. Otherwise, it needs a little persuasion from a mallet. And while I had all this stuff tore apart, I took the liberty to put in a new suspension kit I've had lying around for a long time. It was actually the first kit from my 3rd gen Tacoma that I put in. So it's finally getting some use. And that was the key right there. The block of wood kind of helped it straight, and then using the big bar and pressing it up against the frame here just gave it that just a little bit amount of leverage to be able to push down into it and then hit it with the dead blow. We're good. So I'm leaving this loose and I'm putting the 2 bolts connecting the steering to the lower control arm here. And it's these 2 big massive bolts here. But I'm using a pin as an alignment tool to make sure I get these put in the right way the first time. So I'm using the jack stand to give myself a little upward pressure in the lower control arm, and my left hand here is pulling down on the upper control arm just to compress the 2 a little bit and help me get these lined up. Again, using my little pin here, and I've got multiples. Going to use that to kind of get these holes lined up perfectly. It's just snug now. I'll come back and torque everything once I get everything on. Now I'm going to reconnect the steering and the brake line. The sway bar I took off to make the removal of the suspension easier, so I'll put that on later. So the steering on the tie rod end here keeps spinning, so I've heard the best way to do it is to get these threads nice and clean and then put some downward pressure on it and it will tighten up. The tie rod here gets torqued to 67 foot-pounds. And don't forget the cotter pin. These 2 bottom bolts in the lower control arm here are 118 foot-pounds. The big center nut here gets torqued to 175 foot-pounds. Now we're going to take this pin here, going to put it into the slots of the fins of the rotor, and it's going to suck up into the brake caliper. All right. Don't forget the cotter pin and the lock cap here and the dust cap. Don't forget the brake line and sensor mount. And I'll go back later and do the sway bar. And that's it. The axle is finalized and it looks really good. However, everything that possibly could have gone wrong definitely did go wrong. The axle was really hard to get out. Everything just seemed to be stuck on there. The head of the axle on the inner didn't want to come off the shaft itself. I couldn't get it back in. Everything was just problematic. It actually took me 2 full days to do this with video. So it was very, especially, not having done this in a couple years, it was different trying to do it. Plus with the issues of putting the wrong grease in. Please don't do that. I actually ended up having to go back to Toyota and getting a whole nother rebuild kit because you can only buy those greases with a full rebuild kit unless you buy just the inner by itself and they had to order it. So I just bought a whole new kit and now I have extra, so it's great. I hope you guys enjoyed the repair. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe, helps the channel grow, and I will see you guys next time.